Hi, I'm Sally Sattel. I'm a resident scholar here at AEI, and I'm here with Scott Carney, who is trained as an anthropologist turned investigative reporter. He's been a contributing editor for Wired, and still is.
Indeed, I'm still on the
Okay.
masses. They use ink on me every month.
Good. And we're here to discuss his new book, The Red Market. The subtitle is On the Trail of the World's Organ Brokers, Bone Thieves, Blood Farmers, and Child Traffickers. So, Scott, I know you spent several years working on this, and you lived in India for quite a while. But exactly how did you embark on the trail of the organ brokers, thieves, farmers, and traffickers?
Well, it started out when I was in graduate school. I had finished the first 3 years of a PhD program in anthropology, and I wasn't sure I wanted to continue. And like many graduate students, I was broke. And a friend of mine said, I asked a friend, how do you think I should make money? He said, look in the back pages of the weekly paper, and there are drug trials you can sign up for. And I thought that was a great idea, and I immediately signed up for this drug trial to test the erectile dysfunction drug Levitra. And that just changed my career entirely, because suddenly, one, I no longer had grad school behind me, but I was in this really interesting situation where I was being paid to test a pharmaceutical that would then go on to sell billions of dollars worth of revenue. And I started thinking about what that means to rent your body to science. And as I investigated more, you see that these drug trial businesses are enormous. They're professional guinea pigs that jump from clinical trial to clinical trial. And because taking a drug to market can cost easily $1 billion from chemical research all the way out through animal trials, human trials, and marketing, that the companies have learned that they could outsource clinical trials to places like Mexico, to China, to India, to places in Africa. And it just raised a lot of issues with what happens when you globalize medical research, and where standards in the United States are high and standards are very low for safety and things like that in other countries. And so I just delved into that, and it sort of started me thinking along these lines.
So actually then, how did you meet your first organ donor, or organ seller, or organ vendor, first broker? I mean, there's a very long trail from legal pharmaceutical clinical trials to the thriving black markets, or red markets, which is a very...
Well, they're all sort of a piece
overseas.
In my mind. I mean, they all play with this idea of altruistic donors, like the idea that you are giving something out of the goodwill of yourself. And I found that that's a great cover story for hiding crimes. When you say someone's an altruistic donor, no one looks to see where that supply chain begins. So in the case of kidney donors, I was living in the South Indian city of Chennai, where a couple years before the tsunami had come and just wiped out the whole southern coast of India, and hundreds and thousands of people were put into refugee camps. One of those refugee camps was in Chennai. And in these camps, there were some aid agencies distributing some aid, and really no economic employment. So what happens is that after any natural disaster, different sorts of brokers come in and try to take advantage of people. I mean, you can remember after Haiti, there were all these adoption, Christian adoption groups trying to smuggle children out of Haiti. Same thing happens outside of Congo with the conflict there. And it was no different here in Tsunami Nagar, which had quickly gotten the name Kidney Vakam, or Kidneyville, because when I was there, I found 80 women who had all sold their kidneys, and you could just see these scars on every person in the village had that because they'd all extracted it and sold it at hospitals who were very willing to pay minimal amounts of money to these women to move their kidneys. Some were sold abroad, but most of them were sold domestically inside the borders of India. And the women would usually be promised something like $2,000 or $3,000 for their kidney. The broker would give them half up front and half at the end, but they never gave them the money at the end. But that wasn't even really what the problem was. It wasn't about how the money moved, but the fact that you created a small population of people everyone was donors, and the only reason they donated was because they were desperate and they were victims of a natural disaster.
Had you seen any models in your? I know you went to a lot of countries. Did you see any place that seemed to do this kind of thing right, where they made it more transparent so that the donor, him or herself, was very well informed and was given the amount of money that he or she was promised? I know that's a big problem with brokers, and the middleman, of course, always consumes so much of the you know, the money. And there's poor follow-up care. I mean, it's a catalog of nightmares, which I mean, this is in some ways beautifully written and quite moving in places, but it's kind of a macabre travelogue in other ways too. Has anyone done it well?
I haven't found any place. Oh, I think there are attempts. I mean, there's attempts in Iran, there's attempts in, I believe, the Philippines, where they're trying to do these commercialized systems. But I think you always run into the fundamental problem is that usually it's the most destitute people who are selling their kidneys ultimately, and they're usually not doing it out of, you know, when you sell your kidney, you get a couple $100, and it doesn't, or maybe even a couple $1,000, right? But in my experience, I've never met somebody whose life was turned around because of this transaction, where the money went and was used well, and they invested in, like, a tea stall or something, and then their life blossomed. Usually, and I've met them, you know, a week or two after, all the way to 6 or 7 years after. They're still all poor. They're still all in a lot of trouble, and some of them complain of poor aftercare. Some don't. Sometimes the operations are great and there's no real medical complications. But I am very skeptical of the commercialized systems. Not to say that they're impossible to work, but because you start creating this stable supply of donors who are desperate, and those are usually the people who are selling. And I haven't really been able to find a place where it's unproblematic.
Yeah, I've been following this too, as you know, and I know one of the reasons that you haven't been able to find a place is because the World Health Organization and other international medical groups have been suppressing any kind of innovation, which is kind of unfortunate. And what you describe, I can understand the skepticism that this could ever work, but the kinds of scenarios that you paint so vividly, and that others have, certainly, this isn't an outlier. I mean, I've read lots of accounts of these illicit trades that do go very badly, but that's because they're illicit and not because they're trades. And that becomes really the $64,000 question, as you say, is in the book, is really not whether, at least how I understood one of your bottom lines, was not whether there should be these exchanges, but how to structure them so that people are not exploited and that the lives of both people, not only the recipient but the donor, improves as well. And that's one of the big issues that I'm interested in.
Well, I think I agree with a lot of what you're saying here, but I think that one of the fundamental problems that we have in all of the organ donation systems is that, let's talk about the United States, where it's legal and we all sort of, you know, the ethical problems aren't huge. When you have a kidney failure, a doctor will come up to you and say, you have kidney failure, you're going to be on dialysis for the rest of your life, or you'll get a new kidney and then your life will be better, right? And the message that people hear, and what most doctors say, is you need a kidney. What's not really said is you need someone else's kidney. Now, we talk about kidneys as if, and all human flesh, as if they can be separated from that supply chain. Like, there's no history to any organ. And I think that is the fundamental problem, because we're treating an organ as a commodity, as something in the same way you would sell grain or something like this, and you think you can abstract it. But a human tissue is from a person, and people make decisions, and we are disrespecting the fact that there's these complex social interactions. And the doctors in the United States and elsewhere, put up this wall of privacy that says you can't know where the kidney comes from, because either the person will be ashamed of it, or there'll be bribery, or there'll be some sort of conflict of interest. And I think what this does is it helps disguise the supply chain, where when that excess, because we know that there's more kidneys demanded than there is supplied, that excess can easily turn into criminal underworlds. And And I think that the only way to solve this problem isn't just through an economic solution, whether you pay someone or don't. I'm somewhat ambivalent to that question personally. But the issue is that we can't think of kidneys as kidneys. We have to think of them as people's kidneys, and we need to open up that supply chain and understand that there's a personal relationship that underlies everything. And if we don't have that minimum level of respect, we'll always be open to horrible abuses.
Well, that's an interesting point, and we're here actually to have this discussion for the website, but we'll also be talking about it with a larger group of folks. And I know this particular thing will come up, and what you say about that the anonymity should be stripped away, because you know, I don't even know if you know this, but did you know I got a kidney? And that's why I'm so interested.
Oh, I was wondering.
Oh my goodness!
I was wondering.
That's why I'm so interested in this
Okay.
topic. And before this was in
Was it from India or?
No, but I contemplated going overseas, and probably, I don't know what I would have done. But you're exactly right. When you're told you have organ failure, if you're, well, actually, since I'm a physician, I knew that what my choices were. You know, you wait on you either wait on dialysis and languish on dialysis for many years. In a big city, it's often 10 years. Sure. Until a deceased person, you hope, dies before you. I mean,
Right.
what a horrible situation to be in. Or it's exactly right, you find someone to give you a body part. And in the end, thank goodness I did, a wonderful woman. But there was a long period where it took me quite a while to find someone. But I went through my own internal calculus about who would I want to be my donor.
Sure.
And I thought, frankly, the best thing for me would be someone anonymous. I didn't want to know. I didn't want any kind of moral obligation.
Right.
I just wanted to make sure that person was treated with respect.
Right.
And his or her health was, of course, protected and guaranteed. And I would have gladly paid them had that been legal.
Sure.
So this is something we'll debate.
But you as
the
person who
anonymity.
You as the person who needed the kidney, you're not the beginning of the supply chain, though. And when things can go wrong, they go wrong at the beginning and not the end of the supply chain. And I respect that you're in a horrible position when you need a kidney. I mean, it's a terrible place to be, and you're faced with that endless problem of where you're beyond dialysis. It's a bad place to be. But on the other hand, you didn't want to know where the kidney came from.
Oh, that's not. But
well, you didn't want to have a relationship with this person.
Right.
Maybe that's a better way to phrase it.
First, right.
But if you don't, and you put all of the power of that transaction and controlling that transaction into a middleman, whether it's a wonderful glass and steel Johns Hopkins, respected institution, or some third world hospital that just says, yeah, it's ethical, don't worry about it. I mean, you, and then no one else, not only you, but no one else can look at those records. Then what can you hide? And that's really what my book is about. Is that 90% of the time, it says, so according to the WHO statistics, everything's great. No, people aren't being exploited, and the transaction happens fine. But 10% of the time, you could have things like people being kidnapped and locked in rooms and having their kidneys extracted. You could have people who are murdered for their kidneys. In China, they'll execute prisoners for their kidneys.
Yes.
It can go, when it goes bad, it can go very, very bad.
I agree 1,000%, and I suppose we should end on a point of agreement here, because I certainly think Johns Hopkins is a heck of a lot different from a rural hospital in India. But the point of agreement clearly is that at the giving end, at least in the third world for sure, developing world, many people are taken advantage of. But the flip side is how so many people are dying because there is a lack of organs, and that is the very reason why there is a black market.
Sure.
So somewhere along the line, as everyone does acknowledge, the only real way to get rid of a black market is to have a more transparent legal form of exchange, and that's the debate over how to do that. Or there'll be deaths. more deaths, and you just take your pick. But I'd love it if we could find a middle ground, and that's what policymakers are trying to.
I think the conversations need to continue happening from a very diverse group of people.
And transparently.
And transparently, right? And I think that there are solutions. I mean, if you think that we have 6 or 7 billion people in the world right now, and the demand for, and all these people are going to have all sorts of problems that need other body parts, not just kidneys, but blood and bones and eggs and you name it. And we need to figure out how to do things morally and ethically on all sides of the supply chain. Everyone needs to be served because we live on one planet, and we need to fundamentally understand the ethics of all this. Because right now, science has moved a lot faster than the ethical conversations. We're able to transplant all sorts of things between people, and we have the technical know-how. But at what point do we have the social know-how to make it all work? And that's the crux of it. And no one's going to solve it today. Not me, not you. No one's going to do it.
We'll work on it.
All right.
Okay. Thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me.